Rocky Horror Minute is rated R. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is also rated R. We're going to spend this time discussing the movie in gory detail, and along the road we will talk about some adult content and use some of our favorite swear words.
Amu, iku, uhuezi.
Consider yourselves warned. Welcome to Rocky Horror Minute, the podcast where we break down the Rocky Horror Picture Show and discuss itty-bitty little details of the movie 1 minute at a time. I am one of your hosts with a mild Rocky Horror hangover, Leandra.
And I'm your other host, Kelly, and I also have a Rocky Ho hangover.
Oh, yeah. We were social distancing with Oscar over the weekend, so that's where the ho and the Rocky comes from.
Yeah, Oscar forever in our hearts. We visited his grave.
Yeah, we did stuff on his grave.
Yeah, exactly. We left a bouquet of poppers.
Yeah. And I didn't know this, but they'd recently kind of followed the Snapple brand thing where you can take the popper's lid off and it has a little trivia fact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, true story about Oscar over the weekend when I was hanging out with him. I referenced again how on the podcast he outed himself as a foot fetishist, and he again, just like on the podcast, said, "No, I'm a foot admirer." And I said, "Oscar, what's the difference?" And he said, "I wouldn't suck on a foot." And I said, "Would you receive a foot job?" And he said, "No, I would never receive a foot job, because when you're having sex with someone and they put their feet on your dick, it's really cold." And
yeah,
to me, there's only one way you can come by that knowledge. So anyway, we think he got that from a factoid on a Popper's bottle, like a Snapple cap. But anyway, this is Rocky Horror Minute, and today we're discussing minute 16 of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Do you want to take us through that minute, Kelly?
Oh, why not? We're already here. We've already talked about Oscar and his foot fetish. So this minute begins where Brad and Janet are for the first time in the song saying, "There's a light." So they sing that, and then they continue, "There's a light." Over at the Frankenstein place, the chorus continues, and then we get a solo from a mysterious man in a castle who is played by Richard O'Brien. We see him up in a window, and he says, "The darkness must flow down the river of night's dreaming." Right, Leandra? "Flow,
right.
Morpheus, slow. Let the sun and night come streaming into my life." While he's singing that, he's kind of just like shrinking down out of the window. And they start actually, so this minute ends at "Flow, Morpheus, slow." I'm sorry. So anyway, that's what we got. We also, at right before that, Brad and Janet get kind of split apart by some motorcycles that are driving past them. Potentially the same motorcycles that they saw outside that went past them, which I guess are supposed to be different motorcycles than the same ones that passed them earlier, because otherwise they ran faster than the motorcycles because they got to the castle sooner.
I mean,
thoughts, Leandra?
They're definitely young high school students who just graduated, so perhaps they were also on the track team, and perhaps the motorcyclist took a wrong turn. I don't think that's actually likely.
Yeah,
but wouldn't that be fun?
I think it's supposed to be a different group of motorcyclists, even though I'm sure it was played by the same ones. They're all, dressed in full black and completely covered, so... Anyway, so that's the minute. It's mostly just the song. There's not a lot to see besides riffraff in the castle.
Before I get into an extensive and exhausting breakdown of everything I know about Oakley Court, just wanted to confirm that yes, these are the Transylvanians on the motorcycles. There's even a picture of them, so we know who they are. It is Stephen Calcutt, Perry Bedden, Christopher Biggins, Imogen Clare, Kimmy Wong, and Fran Fullenwider. These are all of the Transylvanians who were on a motorcycle, not necessarily those motorcycles, although some of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and as we discussed in a previous minute, the drivers were just stunt drivers. But on the backs of them were Transylvanians, which and like as we discussed in a previous minute, they were wearing their full Transylvanian costumes under the motorcycle costumes, and the entire thing. I'm like, why? Anybody could have been in that motorcycle garb on the back of the motorcycle, you know?
I just love that there's literally a picture of all of them on the motorcycles, and you don't see any of that in the movie. You see them dressed in all black instead. So I wonder if this was they did the shot of them pushing through, and it was just too distracting. They're like, okay, just put some black on.
Yeah, I think that would have tipped Brad and Janet off too soon as well.
Tip them off to the fact that they're weirdly dressed people.
Well, just like because earlier they're just like, oh, that's weird. Motorcycles are passing us. They weren't like, which is a different emotion than, well, that's very weird. These complete freaks are driving by on motorcycles,
I guess
you
that's
know?
true.
But then again, the casual attitude Brad has towards there being a castle in the middle of Ohio question mark leads me to believe that perhaps they wouldn't have reacted to that either.
Yeah, he stays calm. It's good. Before I talk about Oakley Court, this might be a good time for you to pause the podcast, get some water, take a break, maybe get a nice leg stretch, because there is a lot of history that I'm going to dive through. So I just want you to be prepared. All right, so we're back. We see the next of our locations. It was Oakley Court, a Victorian Gothic mansion. Oakley Court is situated along a stretch of the Thames known as Water Oakley. At least one site that I referenced through all of this lists Oakley Court as a folly, which is an architectural term for a building that is overly ornamental and serves no functional or practical purpose, and it's often referencing Gothic towers and buildings in the middle of large parks. But that does not appear to be the case. This was built in 1859 for Sir Richard Halsey. It is said that the mansion was built to look like a French chateau to comfort his homesick young French wife, Wee Wee. No, her real name was Ellen Evans, and she was of Bovany Court. Later, Sir Richard Halsey was appointed High Sheriff of Berkshire in 1864 and Justice of the Peace in 1865. And after he died, the Oakley Court exchanged hands many times. In 1874, it was sold to Lord Otto Fitzgerald, and he lived there until his death in 1882. It was rented out for over a decade. Then in 1894, it was purchased by John Lewis Phipps. In 1908, it was sold to Sir William Avery, where he lived until his death. And again, it was rented for years, and then was put on the market in 1916 and was purchased by Ernest Oliver in 1919. This is where things get a little bit fun, because we start getting actual newspapers that we can reference. And by a little bit fun, I mean a little bit fun for me.
Oh, rats. All right. I thought it was finally going to get fun.
Oh, pump your brakes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Oliver purchased Oakley Court along with 50 acres of Berkshire woodland for £27,000. He entertained high-level diplomats and foreign dignitaries and was possibly English headquarters for the French resistance in the 1940s. We know for a fact that French President Charles de Gaulle is rumored to have stayed there during that time. In August 1949, Oakley Court became home to the British film production company Hammer Films, which later became Bray Studios. Using the exterior of Oakley Court were several movies of the 50s and 60s. Most notably are The Reptile, The Plague of the Zombies. There's also Murder by Death, starring Peter Sellers, and The Brides of Dracula, along with other Dracula films. An interesting tidbit about the Dracula films is the directors of those made Oakley Court even spookier by using candles to light the entire court. They didn't use any other type of light during their filming. And of course, on November 7th, 1981, Oakley Court opened its doors as the Oakley Court Hotel. And now every couple of months, someone sends me a message on social media to let me know that it is a hotel and they think that this is brand new information. And for them, it is. And for that, I'm very happy. So I even bought a pin from RKO Army that has a
Yeah.
picture of Oakley Court, and under it reads, "The Rocky Horror Castle is a hotel." And a thing on my bucket list is to one day go there for the Time Warp picnic.
Aw.
Time Warp is the name of the UK Rocky Horror fan club, and it looks like a super fun event.
Yeah, they were actually talking about how the castle is a hotel in the director's commentary, where Richard O'Brien, or not director's commentary. I keep calling it that because I call all commentaries that, but obviously Richard O'Brien and Patricia Quinn were not the directors, so it's just the commentary that they did. But anyway, they were talking about, oh, the castle's a hotel now, and I was like, hey, they said the line, but
Ah,
also they were like, what a shame! It's such a shame.
oh,
So I guess they weren't fans of that decision.
I have no idea. I do know that they extensively renovated, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in
Yeah,
an.
they would have to, because actually Richard O'Brien was also talking about when they panned over to him in the castle, he was talking about how there was no floor.
Yeah, it was in a state of disrepair during that part of its life.
So he was saying he was almost falling through all the time because there was no floor up there.
Do you think that Betty Monroe would have loved it or listed it?
Well, with her, it's always listed. She's like, just get the fucking thing on the market and I'll find something better. But oh wait, no, she's the Love It, so she would love it. She would just build it more. See, the thing with that show, not to get into Love It or List It minute, is the couple gets their entire house renovated and like redecorated to be their perfect house. Meanwhile, that bald guy finds them a new house that hits some of their points, but you I feel like they always choose Love It, as they should, because then they don't have to move. They're
I
already
mean,
in their dream house and they don't have to move into it. Anyway, this is my issue with this HGTV show. That and the incredibly cringy forced banter between Hilary Farr, as she is called now. Or is that her maiden name?
no, she was Hilary LeBeau for this, so
Okay. So anyway, Hilary Farr and whoever the listed guy is. I'm sorry. Dan may cut all of this because it was boring and stupid. Yeah, so it was just definitely an unpleasant place to be filming from an upper floor, from what I understand.
we're definitely going to see some interesting details once we get inside of the house. But let's pan back over to Brad and Janet, who at the beginning of this minute are singing and literally dripping with water. We've referenced before that Janet hypothetically started getting sick at around this time, and I feel really bad for her because if she was already getting sick, I'm sure that being drenched in very cold weather
Yeah.
was going to not make it better. And then when we see Riff for the first time, he's looking out a window in a tower in Oakley Court, possibly at Brad and Janet, but I think more likely, just from a headcanon perspective, he's probably looking at the motorcyclists arriving.
Oh, you think he's what? I thought. See, I always thought he was watching Brad and Janet.
I mean, they're very small and they're not moving very quickly, so I'm just trying to think you can track movement a little bit better than small details that aren't moving, at least not super quickly. We could also suspend our disbelief.
You could try it, but yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. For some reason, I mean, I guess just because he's got that voyeuristic attitude towards everything, I just kind of thought that he was creepily watching Brad and Janet. And as we learned, by the way, that listener poll that I did that polled everybody on whether or not it was actually Riff Raff, Tim Curry, or Riff Raff, Frankenfurter, and Magenta and Columbia at the wedding, an overwhelming majority said that they are the same characters and they were doing recon. So the people have spoken. One film credit for Oakley Court that you didn't mention that I wanted to mention because we've been meaning to watch it for a while now is Vampires, a 1974 lesbian vampire movie in which I believe just some sexy vampire ladies are skulking around the castle trying to eat people and fuck each other. I keep like inviting Leandra over to Netflix and chill that one, but apparently she keeps having to wash her hair or something.
I mean, I was super into it until I heard your Count Chocula impression. And then I'm like, oh, this is going to be what it is through the entire film.
The Chocula impression I did on the Halloween episode was much better when I said I was going to do a Chocula impression and then you said make it sexy and then I tried to add a breathiness to it and it sounded like Russian maybe, but also terrible. It was bad.
What was it that you said in that soundbite?
It was something like I want to suck your cock. No, it's so bad. I can't have it. It's so bad. Oh my god,
it was so good.
Okay, but anyway, that's one movie that takes place at Oakley Court that I really want to watch because I love lesbian vampire movies for reasons that I think should be obvious to our listeners.
And similarly, but not quite the same, I like vampire lesbian movies. So there's a little bit of an overlap between those fandoms.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I just like lesbian movies.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the other thing that I wanted to mention about the song itself was, well, actually we're going to play a clip because this is a clip from that same commentary I've been talking about, but I rather than try and paraphrase Richard O'Brien's words, I'll just play them, but I think it's a really wonderful and interesting tale from the early days of the Rocky Horror Show.
When we did the show, this was the one line over at the Frankenstein place that made me relax because I was so, my sphincter was tight. The sweat on my brow was thick. My heart was pumping.
Was it?
Because I was behind the screens and wondering whether anyone was going to like it or was they going to go sitting there going, oh, let us, you know.
Oh dear Richard.
And we went into we all sang that line over at the Frankenstein place.
Yeah.
There's a light over the Frankenstein place.
Yeah.
And they laughed. And the minute they laughed, I went,
You knew.
oh, it's all right. Everything's going to be
All
all right.
right.
If they're laughing at that, they'll laugh at the rest of it. It'll all be okay.
So yeah, I just think that that's fascinating stuff that he was really worried, and this is the exact moment when he realized that people were going to love this and were going to get it, is when they said there's a light over at the Frankenstein place and the audience laughed, which to me says that I guess that must have been the first time the audience laughed in the Rocky Horror Show.
It must be.
I mean, I assume if it had gotten a laugh sooner, he would have unclenched. But anyway,
Don't kink shame Richard O'Brien.
Listen, I had, before we started this minute, I had in our Google Doc where we have our notes, I had just sphincter stuff. And Leandra was like, okay, I'll just leave that there and you can talk about the sphincter stuff because I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, I just saw it and I went, oh, that looks like Kelly bullshit. That's fine.
Yeah. She was, I'm sure, very relieved to find out that it was at least not my own sphincter that I was going to discuss. That's for the podcast only fans that we're going to launch.
Yeah, that'll be great. So it's over at the Frankenstein place, but it's Frankenfurter, who we reference. It literally wasn't until I was listening to it during my research for Rocky Horror Minute that I stopped to think about how kind of silly and dumb it is to call it Frankenstein Place and then immediately, and by immediately I mean several minutes later, say, oh, but it's Frankfurter.
See, I thought it was like not saying like this is Sir Frankenstein's castle, but like just saying like, oh, look at that Frankenstein looking castle over there. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I'm not
Do
sure if that's
you?
what they mean. I don't know.
I'm just saying like I'm saying like I took it as them calling it the Frankenstein place just to be like just because just as like a oh that's like a Frankenstein looking castle over there instead of saying like it's actually owned by Frankenstein.
Okay, I can dig that. Okay. Are we going to talk about the fact that there is something that is perhaps missing from this minute?
We are going to talk about that. First of all, I want to just say in general, fuck the movie audio. Listening to it again, I was really hating it in this particular minute because of the way the way Janet sounds, especially like there's a la ha 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 ha. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that wasn't even auto-tuned or anything.
No, that's just pure raw God-given talent. But yeah, this is the big, probably my biggest issue with the film versus the Rocky Horror Show soundtrack. And I know that might be controversial because people love Once in a While, but for me, it's cutting Brad's verse from There's a Light.
It sure does really need to be in there in order to add some context to a couple of other things in the film, I think.
Really? I'd be interested. But for me, well, first of all, I love the verse. I think it's beautiful. Well, before we get into this too much, let's play the verse. So this would play right at the time when the motorcycles cross between Brad and Janet. There should be a verse that Brad sings. And here it is.
I can see the flag fly. I can see the rain just the same. Well, there has got to be something better here for you and me.
So there that was. And I just, first of all, I think it's a beautiful verse. What do you think, Leandra?
I love it. I think that it is truly wonderfully phrased. Brad is talking about the things that he's seen, that he's experiencing in the moment, and he's just hopeful that things are going to get better. And
yeah,
I love that.
That's it for me. This song is so hopeful and it makes me really emotional. And that's like, it's got such a hopeful voice. Of course, like it's pretty, and also to me, you really need it to give some symmetry to the song, because it's weird to have just Janet do a solo verse and then just choruses and then have Riff do a solo verse, but not Brad. It gives the song to me a much better form. But they cut it for reasons that will never make sense to me. It's not like they couldn't spare the 30 seconds or however long it takes.
Kelly, they needed more time to look at the enter at your own risk sign. Somebody put a lot of thought and effort into creating that sign.
Yeah, I mean, the artistic work that I would prefer would be to hear the whole song. But anyway, it's great. So what do you think it's giving important context for, Leandra? Because I thought that was an interesting statement.
Well, I think that it gives context to a couple of things, and I desperately hope that I don't come off as somebody saying that the sex scenes are somewhat cerebral. So,
if anyone said that, they probably perished in the woods by now, so.
Yeah, they got Shia LaBeoufed by Perry Bedden. So,
yes.
For context, you don't need to hear what Brad's thought process is, but the fact that he has this gigantic smile through the entire song, I think is really important to share. I I really want people to see what he's thinking, because otherwise he's just smiling because Janet's with him and they're looking at a castle. And that's cool. I also think that it's interesting that they reference the flag
I thought that too.
visually.
First of all, without that verse, the flag and the Transylvanian logo and everything are completely ignored by everybody.
Yeah. But we will reference that in minute 17. I promise you. It's in my notes.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing I think is kind of interesting about it is from the lyrics, it would imply that Brad knows that flag is a bad sign.
Yeah.
Because he's saying, I see the flag and I see the rain, but just the same, I think there's got to be something better here. So because of that, that implies that he knows that the flag is not a good thing to be seeing for him. I don't know if it's because it's not an American flag, so he knows that they're foreigners with ways different than his own, or what. What do you think?
I don't know, but it's definitely a really, I think, profound piece of foreshadowing.
Yes, definitely. Man, that's so true. It's great foreshadowing to have that was cut for. I just want to know why that decision was made.
And we will never know.
We will never know.
So let's talk about callbacks now.
So, all right, let's talk about callbacks. I have just a few, but I'm sure Leandra has a lot more to fill in. Probably the really big one in this minute that I always see is right after the motorcycles, in the couple of seconds before Riff starts singing, people will go, fee, fi, fo, fum, sing to us, O hairless one. Or sometimes, actually more often, I hear O balding one. No, I hear hairless one more often, but I like O balding one more because he's not hairless, he has hair.
Yeah.
He's balding, but he's not hairless.
Yeah, he's got a skullet.
The classic skullet. Shout out to Remy, best waiter at any diner in the world. He's at our local diner close to where a Rocky cast performs, so we go there often after shows. Also, even unrelated to Rocky, a lot of us go there, and we always try and get Remy. He's already been posted on our podcast's Instagram once, because Dan and Leandra went to Denny's after their wedding in February, and Remy took a picture with them.
And he now knows us on site. He sees us come in and he goes, sit over here. It's fine.
He's amazing. I mean, really, because usually sometimes we're rolling in with like 15 people and it's like 4 a.m. and he's always just such a sweetie, and he knows us. Some of us have been coming to that Denny's for over 10 years, and he's been there the whole time and just been a total sweetheart. We love him. We love his skullet.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I also love when he says, you don't want that today. Here, I made you a milkshake. And I go, okay.
Yeah. He loves to bring us milkshakes. I hope that working at Denny's during this pandemic has not sucked too badly, because it is open again in DC. So anyway, the next thing is right before like flow Morpheus slow. First of all, sometimes I'll hear people say, make up a word right before he says flow Morpheus slow. That's actually not a made up word. Most people think it is because it's not a word any of us ever hear, but it's a very like archaic term for morphine. So he's saying basically that he wants morphine, I guess. I don't know. But then people also will say, I demand a close-up, and then the camera gets like 1 inch from his forehead, and then you go, oh shit, too close.
I like the kind of Sesame Street version of that where I say, show me near. Holy fuck, show me far.
So those are honestly the only callbacks I have for this minute, though. So
This is one of the first times that you get a lot of deviation regionally with the callbacks. And I'll try and spread them out over this minute and the next time that we hear when these callbacks would happen. They go, there's a light. And then the one that I hear the most at our show is over at the Epcot Center. Because if you look at the dome of Oakley Court, it really does look like the dome in Epcot Center. The Toronto cast in Canada, Excited Mental State, they mentioned that they say there's a light over at Ontario Place, which is referring to their Cinesphere.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
Yeah, there are more, but we'll go over those at another time. There are also a couple of callbacks that I just don't particularly enjoy for this moment. There's also what's at the end of E.T.'s dick. There's a light. Where's Santa on Christmas morning? Burning in the fireplace.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
But that's really all I have for callbacks.
Okay, well then I guess that's it for this minute.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and end this one the same way we end all of ours, with me saying now.
Yeah.
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So get the fuck out. If they're kegels with your butt, they're called bagels.